What leverage does Putin have over Trump? Compromising materials, financial incentives, or more evidence of collusion?
If you get your news and information from leftist pop media, you'd probably be convinced that Vladimir Putin himself cracked open ballot boxes in Ohio, Michigan, Florida, and North Carolina and hand-stuffed thousands of pro-Trump ballots inside in order to flip the 2016 election. Sound crazy? Well, it should. But if you told someone on the left that story, there is a disturbingly high chance they would actually believe it. Russia Derangement Syndrome. It's like Trump Derangement Syndrome, and there are some mutual symptoms. Usually RDS and TDS afflict the same people. You can find specimens by browsing Twitter and looking for people who post heavily distorted JPEG blue wave memes and have hashtag resist in their bios. In today's video, we're going to look at how the American left is discussing the Russia witch hunt, or as they'd refer to it, the Russia investigation. At some point in the next few days, I'll have a video coming out specifically about the midterm elections and the supposed blue wave. The implications of Trump keeping the House and the Senate are great. If he keeps both, he'll be able to fire Mueller and Rosenstein without fear of impeachment by a Democrat House. We'll talk more about that in the midterm videos, but today's video focuses specifically on the Russia witch hunt. It's presented by a guy named Max Bergman on behalf of our friends at Now This, and there's some truly insidious stuff in this video. And on the topic of hacking, let's talk quickly about not a witch hunt, but the very real threats to your online privacy and security. Last month, Facebook suffered one of their biggest data breaches yet, as hackers made off with the sensitive information of approximately 30 million users, contact info, phone numbers, email addresses, hometowns, current cities, birth dates, device types, and more. This was the information that hackers gathered and stole by exploiting a breach in Facebook's security protocols. You want to stay safe online? Be smart about what you post, obviously, but you need to take your personal internet protection to the next level by using a VPN or virtual private network. Prevent yourself from falling victim to hackers on public Wi-Fi or shady websites that log and store your info by using Virtual Shield, one of the easiest to use and fastest VPNs in the world. They have a strict no-log policy that means your personal info and browsing history isn't being stored anywhere. You have the right to total and complete privacy. This month, Virtual Shield is offering 25% off VPN plans and all premium add-ons, including Protection Plus, residential access, monthly maintenance, phone support, and more for as low as $3 a month. And don't forget about IdentiSafe, which allows you to block microphone and camera access from unwanted spies and hackers. If you don't want entities public or private watching and listening, IdentiSafe is for you. virtualshield.com/allsup. Check it out today. They're the only VPN that I trust.
You've probably heard a lot about the Russia investigation. With near constant news coverage, it can be a bit chaotic and confusing. But here are the 5 things you need to know about the investigation into the Trump campaign's collusion with Russia.
What he's doing here is incredibly misleading but very effective. Notice how he labels it the investigation into the Trump campaign's collusion with Russia. Not alleged, not accused, just assumed to be true. This would be like calling a murder investigation the, quote, investigation into John Smith's murdering of Bob Johnson. In criminal justice, you're investigating a crime, not a person, and you're not supposed to accuse someone of a crime until there's evidence that they committed it. So it's totally inaccurate to call this the investigation into Trump's collusion with Russia, because, as we're going to get into shortly, there is zero evidence of collusion with Russia. None. And the evidence they put forward is dishonestly presented, because these people aren't unbiased fact finders. The people who made this video, and Mr. Bergman himself, are leftist political operatives that are lying to the public about what's actually going on.
Number 1. The special counsel investigation is getting results. Even compared to other investigations in recent history, this investigation has uncovered a huge amount of wrongdoing. The investigation has resulted in over 100 criminal charges, 35 indictments, 6 people found guilty, and 2 people sent to prison.
And what they're not going to tell you is that none of those convicted as a result of the investigation were convicted for anything to do with election meddling. For example, Paul Manafort, who is currently in jail, was convicted of 5 tax fraud charges, 1 charge of hiding foreign bank accounts, and 2 counts of bank fraud. Nothing in there about espionage, treason, or working to overthrow American democracy, is there? I wonder why Mr. Bergman isn't telling his audience of Russia Derangement Syndrome afflicted Now This followers what exactly Manafort is in jail for. George Papadopoulos, a former Trump campaign aide, served 14 days in jail for giving misleading statements to the FBI when they were investigating his role in the Trump campaign. His great crime, apparently, was trying to set up a meeting between Trump and Putin, and corresponding with a British professor that knew people in Russia. That professor, Joseph Mifsud, had told Papadopoulos that the Russian government might have access to the emails that were missing from Hillary Hillary Clinton's email server. Papadopoulos was engaging in standard practice for campaign officials. He was seeking out opposition research on the opponent. There's nothing illegal nor unusual about that. Ultimately, no emails were ever received, and his only crime was misleading investigators about the specifics of his communications with Joseph Massoud. So, yeah, Mr. Bergman, that's really all there is. Those are the results of over a year of investigation. Tax fraud from like 10 years ago, before Trump even ran for president, and a guy that was attempting to seek out Oppo research, something every campaign in history has engaged in. Additionally, Mr. Bergman isn't going to tell you that most of these 100 criminal charges, which sounds extreme, were filed against Russian nationals that are accused of dastardly deeds like, wait for it, buying Facebook ads, and you won't believe this, running Facebook pages. They were running pro-Bernie and pro-Trump Facebook pages, if you can believe it. Weird, though, because we're not seeing Bernie blasted for alleged Russian collusion, almost as if they're just mad at Trump because Trump is the one who defeated the establishment's chosen hero, Hillary Clinton.
The president's first national security advisor, his campaign chairman, his deputy campaign chairman, and a foreign policy advisor have all pleaded guilty to crimes. The Mueller team has also brought charges against dozens of Russian operatives who carried out this unprecedented attack on America's democracy.
Man, if you think that some Russian guys making a couple sock accounts and shitposting pages is an unprecedented attack on America's democracy, you're not going to believe some of the other things going on in this country. How about the 1965 Immigration Act, which shifted America's balance of immigration from Western Europe to Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, and resulted in the importation of millions of future democratic socialist voters? How about the 1986 Simpson-Mazzoli amnesty package, which allowed millions of Democrat voters and future socialists to stay in our country? The global movement of people, 80% of whom end up voting for big government, Democrat, left-wing, and socialist ideals, that is the real attack on American democracy. For the last 60 years, the left has been frustrated that they can't convince Americans to go along with their communist Trotskyite agenda. That's why the left, along with the Trotskyite neoconservatives like Bill Kristol that call themselves Republicans, that's why they've been pushing so hard for mass migration into the US. They want to put their finger on the scale of American democracy and permanently transform this country into a multi-ethnic Venezuelan-style economy. You want examples of democracy hacking, Mr. Bergman? I've got some for you right here.
Number 2. There were repeated contacts between the Trump camp and Kremlin-linked operatives. There were 2 campaigns to elect Donald Trump. One run out of Trump Tower, and one run out of the Kremlin. The 2 campaigns were in constant communication. There have been over 87 contacts and 26 meetings between Trump's associates and Kremlin operatives during the campaign and transition. And the Trump team lied and tried to conceal each and every one.
Notice the shape-shifting nature of their definition of a Kremlin operative and Russian agent. And notice, too, how they refuse to provide any sort of evidence or citations for these supposed contacts. Even assuming that there were communications between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, this again would be fairly standard procedure. There's a lot of work involved in diplomacy, and presidential campaign teams often lay the groundwork for diplomacy with foreign countries before they take office. And by the way, many of these spooky, scary communications between the Trump team and Russians have to do with business. For example, Wilbur Ross owns a stake in a shipping company that does business with a Russian petroleum company, and Rex Tillerson, as former CEO of ExxonMobil, has a history of business dealings with the Russians. You know, I purchased a car stereo install kit for my Audi, rest in peace, that I'm pretty sure was shipped to me from Russia. Does this make me a Russian colluder? Well, according to the standards of Mr. Bergman and those with RDS, quite possibly.
Number 3. The June 9th meeting was collusion. In the summer of 2016, the Trump campaign's top officials, Paul Manafort, Donald Trump Jr., and Jared Kushner, met with a team of Russian operatives. This included a Kremlin-linked lawyer, a suspected former military intelligence officer, and a suspected money launderer.
Hold on. Suspected former military officer. Suspected money launderer. Suspected by who exactly? Why are we supposed to trust that speculation which is taking place entirely without evidence? You know, this speculation has about as much reliability as someone looking at Mr. Bergman here and saying, you know what, Mr. Bergman, you're a suspected pedophile. No evidence necessary, right? It's just a wild accusation, and anyone can speculate whatever they want. This kind of investigation work is totally dishonest and completely reprehensible. Even Joseph McCarthy, the man who was lambasted for his anti-communist work in the 1940s and 50s, even he had higher standards of evidence than this guy. But let's go ahead and see what suspected responsible journalist Mr. Bergman has to say.
They met with the intention of getting dirt on Hillary Clinton, with the understanding that it was part of the Russian government's effort to sabotage her campaign. That is collusion, plain and simple.
No evidence for any of this, and for their part, Don Jr. claims the meeting was about Russian-American adoption policy, so he said versus he said, and even if they had been meeting to get opposition research, again, there are no laws against that. Collusion is a term they throw around a lot, but collusion actually isn't a crime. So, if Mr. Bergman wants to offer any evidence of actual crimes being committed, aside from his very impressive mind reading he's displayed so far, I'm all ears.
Number 4. Trump has been doing exactly what Putin wants. He's demonstrated a consistent pattern of pro-Russia behavior by calling for better relations with the Kremlin and actively advancing some of Russia's top foreign policy objectives.
So let's get this straight. Trump wanting peace with Russia and better relations between the world's two most powerful nuclear powers is somehow evidence of collusion? People like this would rather see Trump agitate and provoke Russia's military, dragging the US into yet another meaningless foreign conflict, than ever see peace between our two nations. Sorry, Mr. Bergman, but I'd rather have peace between Russia and the US than drag us into a war to satiate your neurotic conspiracy theories about Trump-Russia collusion. It's actually pretty sick to think about just how bloodthirsty many of these rootless elites are. They would rather have war and conflict for no good reason than ever see peace and good diplomacy.
This strategy of personal bromance comes at the expense of long-standing American foreign policy interests and has no geopolitical rationale.
You're right, Mr. Bergman. There is definitely one country that would benefit from more wars and agitation and pointless fighting between the two most powerful nuclear nations on Earth. That country that stands to benefit, however, wouldn't be either the US or Russia.
Number 5. Republicans in Congress have done everything they can to cover up for Trump. Congress is supposed to investigate abuses of power by the executive branch. It's why they're there. Yet congressional Republicans have served as the cover-up caucus, neglecting oversight responsibilities and attacking officials in charge of the Russia investigation while refusing to hold those responsible for attacking America accountable. As much as we've learned about collusion over the past 2 years, there are still key facts that we don't know. Why did Trump and his team lie about every meeting with Russian operatives? What did they talk about in those meetings, and why are they so desperate to hide it? What leverage does Putin have over Trump? Compromising materials, financial incentives, or more evidence of collusion? And most importantly, what did Trump know about collusion and when? These questions and others are exactly what Special Counsel Robert Mueller is investigating. Finding out these answers is crucial to holding those responsible for the attack on America accountable and making sure it doesn't happen again.
I have to give them credit. They've done a great job of getting people all amped up over something there is no evidence or proof actually happened. Lost in all of Mr. Bergman's misdirection and manipulation was the simple fact that there is yet to be any documented evidence of illegal, unethical, or treasonous contact between the Trump campaign team and the Russian government. You can accuse people of being Kremlin operatives all you want. You can investigate all the Facebook meme pages you want. And you can whine about how you'd really like to see the US and Russia at each other's nuclear throats all you want. But none of your Russia derangement syndrome is going to amount to anything except disappointment for you. If Trump had colluded with Russia to steal our democracy, we would at least have a bit of evidence by now. And the lengths they're going to try to convince the American people that the Trump campaign's totally normal and standard diplomatic meetings with the Russian government are somehow proof of treason is completely ridiculous. They've jumped the shark, to use the expression. In conclusion, I think the biggest takeaway here is what Mr. Bergman said about Russia-US diplomatic relations. He considers Trump's endeavor to make peace with Russia to be evidence of Trump somehow being controlled by the Russian government. That, of course, begs the question, what would Mr. Bergman prefer Trump to do? The opposite of making peace is, of course, making war. Perhaps in Syria, perhaps in Iran, these specifics don't matter as much. What matters is that these people are testing Trump's will. They want to bait him into using military aggression against Russia in order to somehow prove that he isn't a Russian agent. Of course, that will never work. They'll never believe him, and the result will be wasted bullets, money, and, God forbid, American lives. You have to wonder, how evil does someone have to be that they would be willing to get American soldiers killed in order to score a political victory in a debate over election meddling that doesn't even exist?